Imagine you hit a like button and it takes a sweet time to update the like count and also may change the like button's color. Now, changing of this count, changing of this gesture happen after a server call gets complete. That's a bit frustrating, isn't it? What if the UI gets updated instantly? The moment you hit the like button, you see the like count gets changed, the like button's background color gets changed, all this thing instantly. And if there is a failure for updating it to the server, it gets auto corrected immediately. That's optimistic UI. Today, we will not only learn the optimistic UI pattern, we will also implement it with React's built-in use optimistic hook. One of the hook that not many developers understand it well, and the effort today will be to make you understand in a way that you'll never forget. Along with that, we'll also understand a few edge cases, error scenario handling, because it is very important that with optimistic UI pattern, you also know how to handle errors and how to do rollbacks. Let's quickly see what are we going to learn today. We're going to learn what is an optimistic UI. That's the first thing. That's how I'll introduce the optimistic UI pattern to you. Then what React provides, I just now told React provides a hook called use optimistic. Using that, we can implement the optimistic pattern in React application. Then we're going to do the anatomy of that hook. As I told, that hook is a bit tricky to understand in the beginning, but once you do the proper anatomy, the slices and the dices of the hook and its syntax, you will understand it really well. Then a mini project using use optimistic that we do every time in our pattern masterclass. And then error handling and the rollback thing that I mentioned. Then we'll talk about the use cases and ideas, pitfalls and anti-patterns, and of course, a task that I'll give to you at the end of this session. Excited? What is optimistic UI? Optimistic UI or optimistic user interfaces are those where the interface gets updated right away, assuming that the server operation will be always successful. And it will also have the option for a rollback in case the server operation fails. Optimistic UI pattern is actually you can call as a UX pattern also that increases your perceived speed and keeps the user engaged. As I told before, if you hit the like button and you're waiting, what exactly happening? Like button's color is not getting changed, like count is not getting changed, maybe something wrong. And then after a few seconds, you suddenly figured out, oh, it got updated. That's not a great UX. The great UX would be to increase your perceived speed so that you can perceive that the like action happen instantly, and if there is a problem in terms of server communication, the call failure, and etc., there is a way to roll back. One operation is confirmation if the server operation successful. Another option is rollback if the server operation is not successful. This confirmation and rollback together is called the reconciliation. Okay. So in terms of optimistic UI pattern, if the term reconciliation come, it means that the state that you updated instantly on the UI that reconciled with what exactly happened after the server operation is made. If it is successful, you don't have to do anything because you have changed the UI optimistically, assuming that the server operation will be successful. But in case it fails, you have to have the mechanism for rolling back. We are going to see that with examples, don't worry. One thing remember, with the optimistic UI, the real application speed never changes. The time it used to take to go to the server, then go to the database, update the count of the like, come back as a response, it remains same. Only thing that change is the perceived speed. Without optimistic UI, you had to wait to perceive that the like count and the like button background got changed until you get the response back. But your perceived speed has increased. You're seeing it instantly because you're handling this update optimistically. Okay, so this is enough theory. Now let's understand this with an analogy. Imagine you are at a coffee shop. Now there is a busy counter. You given an order for a coffee. Now usually how it happens, like the person take the order, enter the thing in the system, and then say that, hey, order received, you pay and all these things, and you say thank you, and then you wait somewhere, right? So before they say order received and you say thank you, before you do all the payment and all, imagine the guy in the other side of the counter giving you a token. Now this token makes you feel that something happened very fast. Okay, rest of the process of getting the order, submitting the order will take place, but you got the token optimistically, and then they will go ahead and enter the order. In case there is a problem, they will come back and talk to you and fix it. Let's say this is user, hit a submit button, and then the call goes to the server. Here there is a number that is supposed to get updated. This number was initialized with 1, it remains 1. And once server send the response as a success response, this comes back and then this number become from 1 to 2. So this is the regular UI, pessimistic UI. Now in case of optimistic UI, again the same user who click on the submit button. The moment the submit button gets clicked, this gets optimistically updated. If the operation we have here for increasing it like before, it will become 2 immediately. Then in parallel, there will be the asynchronous call will be made to the server just like before. Now in the server, if things are good, if it is successful and all, it is going to reconcile saying that okay, it's been already updated, nothing to do in this UI again. But in case there is an error, in case there is an error case, I'm marking it with a red color. In that case, it has to revert it back to its previous state because it cannot commit this particular change because it was done optimistically. It is not matching with the values in the server. So it will revert it back, roll it back to 1. You got the point? For success case, in the regular UI, user has to wait for the entire round trip. But in this case, user don't have to wait for the entire round trip. The changes happen optimistically immediately. So the perceived speed is much increased over here than over here. I hope now it is very clear. Let me know in the comment if you understood optimistic UI pattern very well. Now we are going to get into use optimistic hook, anatomy of it, and doing some coding with it. React 19 introduced a built-in helper called useOptimistic to do this pattern, this optimistic UI pattern, in much more declarative way. Okay, basically useOptimistic will help us to derive a temporary optimistic value from the real state value while we are making an asynchronous operation to the server. While the operation is going on in flight, we will be able to set an optimistic value, and that optimistic value we can take from our current state value and we can render that value. The rendering happen immediately as it is optimistic, and then it will commit or it will roll back based on whatever the server response is. This is what use optimistic enable us exactly whatever we have learned for the optimistic UI pattern. Now let us do an anatomy of this use optimistic hook. Okay, let's understand what it does and how it does. As other React hooks goes, it starts with the word use and the name optimistic. It's taking two parameters basically. One is current state and something called update function, and it returns an optimistic state and an add optimistic function. You may find it little complex, but it is not because we are going to break it down one by one. First, what is the current state? Current state is nothing but the real state value of your application. Usually, how you keep your real state value of an application or a component, you create a state using useState, right? Or you keep the state somewhere else, maybe in a Redux data store or somewhere. But that particular state value that you manage for your component is nothing but this current state. So it is the real state value. Remember in this way. So you will create a state using useState, and that state value you will pass over there. Imagine if your application is about liking a post, a like button. So you'll initialize the like count with maybe 0. So how do you initialize that like count with 0? You will create a state in your component using useState, initialize with 0. That particular state variable is what you will be passing over here. That's the current state. Next, the update fn. Update fn is a function. Let me call it as a pure function. What is a pure function? That produce the same output for the same input, which doesn't have any side effect. That's the pure function. So update fn is a pure function that compute an optimistic state value from the current state. Okay. So it means that if you want to initialize a like with 0, that's the current state value. The moment you click on the like button, before even you make the server call, you want to show the like as 1. What you will be doing, you will be updating this optimistic state value to 1 based on your current state value. Current state value was initialized with 0. So 0 plus 1, a delta, that is what you will be assigning as your optimistic state value. Okay, understand that. How this thing happen? Update fn signature is like this. It's a function that takes current state and an input. This input can be anything, okay, that is coming from you, and then compute the next optimistic state, and this next optimistic state value React will update to this optimistic state. Okay, and in our JSX we'll be using this optimistic state. We won't be using the current state at all because we want the optimistic value to be rendered in our component, right? Not the actual state. Actual state value will be updated only when a server call completes. But optimistic state is something that we want to show immediately in our component. So whenever the button click happen, we'll be calling something that will basically invoke this update fn, which will take the current state value, which was 0, and maybe an input, maybe a delta, increase by 1, and compute current state plus delta, whatever logic, completely your logic, and produce a next optimistic state. This next optimistic state will be assigned to this optimistic state. And this is what you're using in your JSX anyway. So that gets updated. Your JSX gets updated. Now the question is, how does this update fn gets invoked? To invoke update fn, you have to call this add optimistic function that this hooks keeps. Okay. So add optimistic, let's take it in this way. It is a function you call to apply the optimistic update. So on the button click, like button click, you will call this add optimistic, passing the delta, which is like an input. This particular input get passed over here, invoke this update fn. This is the update fn function, right? This particular input get passed over here, take the current state value, and whatever the logic that you have written inside this function, that function gets executed. The return value of that gets back to the optimistic state. This is how it happens. This is the anatomy. This is how you need to remember the thing. Let me explain this thing very quickly once more. The syntax of useOptimistic goes like this. useOptimistic takes two things. One is the current state and the update function. It returns two things. One is the optimistic state and add optimistic function. Current state, very straightforward. Your component's actual state that you declare with useState. Update function is a function that you define. It is your business case through which you determine what will be the next value of your optimistic state. Optimistic state value is what you show in your JSX, not the current state value. Okay. Now, how do you update this optimistic state? You have to invoke this update fn, right? You invoke it using this add optimistic function. You call this add optimistic function with an input. That input get passed to this update fn function along with the current state value. Now, taking the current state value and the input that you have passed through this add optimistic, you do whatever you want to do and return a value. That return value set to the optimistic state value as the next value. If the optimistic state value you're using inside the JSX, the moment optimistic state value gets changed to a new value, your JSX gets changed, re-render, and you see the latest optimistic value. This is how this anatomy works. I hope it is clear. If it is not, just go back, watch it once more. I'm sure it will be clear. Or let's build something so that it becomes very clear to you. Code time. I have VS Code open and I've created a React project called Optimistic Pattern. I've created this scaffolding the same way that I have done in the previous videos. Under SRC, create a new folder called components, and under component, let's create a new component called like button.jsx. We have been talking about like button a lot, so let's implement a like button but in optimistic way. All right, first thing first, let's create the component, export default function like button. That's our component. Let like button take some props. For example, this is a like for a post, okay, a blog post. So let it take a post ID and we will make initial likes with 0. Sometime in some application you might want to initialize it with 0, somewhere maybe 1. So we are keeping that provision open. So here we are dealing with likes. That means likes is the value that we have to maintain in this component. So it means that it is our state. And to manage the state of this component, we need a hook. We all know which hook we are talking about. Is import useState from React. Great. So here we'll be creating the real source of truth, that is like state, and initialized with this initial likes. Now it's time we define our optimistic like. Optimistic like, again, we know the moment a button is getting clicked, we want to optimistically update the like count value and we want to keep it synced with the current state. For that, we have a hook called useOptimistic. So let us create the useOptimistic hook following the same anatomy that we have learned just now. useOptimistic, we of course need to import it. What parameters useOptimistic hook takes? What we learned just now. The first parameter is the current state. What is the current state? Is likes. So it will take likes. Then we learned that it takes an updater function. Updater function will be in the form of, it takes the current like and an input, let's say delta, and then return a value which will be the next optimistic update value. Here we are dealing with likes. Whatever the current likes value, whether initially it is 0, later 1, later 2, we want it to be incremented by 1, correct, every time. So it means the return value for this particular use case is going to be current likes plus delta. Make sense? So two parameters, one is the current state and another updater function, which will define what will be the value of next optimistic value. That will be returned eventually. That's what we have learned just now. The first one will be the optimistic value, which we have named as optimistic likes. That means whenever this function gets invoked, the return value will be updating this optimistic likes. Okay. And these optimistic likes is what we are going to use in our JSX. We are not going to use these likes. It is the use of this hook to make them in sync. Okay. The likes and the optimistic likes using this updater function. Now the question is how this updater function is going to get invoked. For that only we pass the add optimistic function over here. Wherever we'll be calling this add optimistic, we will be passing this delta with what value we want to increment this likes value. That will be passed, it will be added to the current likes and the value will be updated to the optimistic likes. That's what we'll be using in our JSX. Very simple formula. Okay. Now we have defined everything. With that, first let me define my JSX. Simple JSX. I will have a simple button and here let's show the value of optimistic likes. How about showing a heart icon like this? Like, no? And on click of this button, we are going to call a function called handle like. We are going to define that in a moment. So this is how my JSX is. So let's define handle like. Const handle like equals to, okay, an arrow function. So what handle like is going to do? In a real world application, whenever somebody click on this like button, it is going to send a call to the server. If the server call is successful, we'll get the response back. On the response, we'll be setting these likes, correct? Usually. And this likes, the state value we usually show in the JSX. But here we are handling thing in the optimistic way. So we don't care about showing this likes value over here. Rather, we are showing this optimistic likes value. And it is already stitched and controlled using the use optimistic hook that I have explained, like how they are interrelated. So it is guaranteed that in the handle click, if I invoke this add optimistic like, passing an input or the delta value, let's say 1, this guy is going to invoke this function which will take the current likes value. Current likes value is what? Current likes value is nothing but the likes value, which is 0. Okay. And delta is this particular one, 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 will be returned. Optimistic likes value will be 1. And that optimistic likes is what we are actually printing over here. That's how things are stitched. But the use case is not that. What we want to show as a use case is two things. First use case is this. We are applying the optimistic changes immediately so that the moment this button is clicked, the value of the optimistic likes will be 1. Again click, it will be 2. Again click, it will be 3. But along with that, like a real world scenario, I want to also start a server call over here. Okay. So for that purpose, let's mimic that. Try. And then let's put a catch. This is the error. And for now, let's just put it like console.error like failed. Now over here, let's mimic one server call, like sending these likes to the server. Okay. Let's assume we have a server call like send likes to the server. And we are sending this post ID, whatever we are getting from this prop. As it is a server call, we have await. And as it is await, we have to make this component function as an async regular. Now let's put this send likes to server, the definition of it. Let's put it like async function send like to server. It takes a post ID. Let's have the post ID. Here we'll first simulate a network call. We all know that we can very well do with a fake promise, like a 700 milliseconds one call we have done. And once the call gets over, let's put a console.log of saying send a like for the post ID, this particular post ID, and then let's do a return of success true. Okay. So it means this function send like to server is actually making an asynchronous call, at least mimicking. And once everything is done, all the things are successful, it is returning success true. Now coming over here, once the call is done, what we'll be doing? Set likes, which is our states updater function. Take the previous value and update it by 1. Are you with me so far? That's all the code. So what is happening over here? The moment this handle click button is clicked, I am making this optimistic update. Likes value was 0 initially. Updater function will be called because I am calling this function over here with the delta 1. Current likes were 0 before. It becomes 0 plus 1, 1. Optimistic likes immediately become 1 in this line. The moment optimistic likes become 1 in this line, this will be 1 because I am rendering only optimistic likes. And then this call will be initiate. So it means setting the value of this optimistic like never waited for this server call to complete. Now server call will go ahead and complete and coming back. Once server call is completed, it is setting the actual state value, and this hook, use optimistic hook, now we'll find the new value for this likes, correct, updated value for the likes, and it will commit, it will reconcile the updated value of likes with the optimistic likes automatically. It will keep in sync. Now in case this server call fails, if it fails over here, of course this line won't be executed. It will directly come under catch. That time this optimistic like update already would have happened over here, but actual state update would not have happened. How are you going to take care of that? We'll come to the error scenario handling and the rollback scenario in a while. But whatever we have done so far, can we test it and see whether it works or not? Now to test this thing out, I'll go to app.jsx. Over here, I will import this like button, and then I'm practically going to delete everything from here and say like button takes a post ID. Let's pass some 123 post ID, and that's about it. Time to test things out. Coming back to the UI, let me click on this. I clicked on this guy. Two things happened. I'm getting an error saying that an optimistic state update occurred outside a transition or action. To fix, move the update to an action or wrap with start transition. First error that I have to notice and fix. Second thing, if you notice, when I click on this guy, there is a delay. With that, this is getting updated. Maybe it is not that visible. So I'll go to the code once. This one I'll make as 2 seconds. Okay. Now I think it will be very much visible. I come back, I refresh. Now if I click on it, you will see it will take 2 seconds, some time. And see, and now it's get updated, right? So the instant update, the the whole reason why we were choosing this optimistic UI update is failed. If I click again is going to take some time, then it's get updated. So things are not working really as expected, as I thought. Main reason that why all these things are happening, because if you are doing an optimistic state update, you have to make sure the updater function that we are calling right in the code, this guy, it has to be inside an action, or you need to handle it concurrently using start transition. I have already created a video on start transition and the concurrency. The link to that video is in the description of this video. You can go ahead and check it out. Okay, so now to fix that, what we can do is like, we have this handle like, isn't it? And handle like is being called over here. Inside handle like, we are already handling add optimistic like and also making a server call, right? Now we can put this handle like under start transition, right? When concurrency come into picture, we'll see that this error, whatever we got, it will go off. And due to this error, the side effect that we have seen, the optimistic update, the way that it has to happen instantly is not happening. That also will be fixed. Okay. First, import start transition from React. I have imported it over here. And then coming over here, let's refactor this arrow function called start transition takes a function. So let's take a function again, and here you will be returning the function that you want to handle in the start transition. Our function is a handle like. So this is handle like. So the only thing that we have done, we had handle like function. We just put the handle like in a start transition. Okay. Now let's go back to the UI. Remember the time is still 2 seconds. I'll refresh it. I'll first click and notice when this gets updated, whether there is an error comes here and when the success message comes. I'm clicking, immediately got updated, success message yet to come. Now it came after 2 seconds. No error. Again, I'll click, immediately happening. Success will come later point in time. I can keep clicking. See, 3, 4. Now 2 times it will come. See, but no error. So the error is also gone. Instant update is also happening. My optimistic update is working fantastically. So let's do a quick recap of item. What we have done over here. Very simple. We have the current state. We sync the current state with the optimistic state. We have the updater function. With updater function, we are keeping the optimistic state updated. Optimistic state value is what we are actually rendering in our JSX. And on any interaction, we are keeping the things updated so that instantly we can see the update. But regular server call is being made, and after the server call is over, we are updating the actual state so that through use optimistic, the actual state can keep the optimistic state also in sync. This is what we have learned. This is the code. Everything is working. And last part is you have to make sure the function which is actually calling the optimistic update, add optimistic, should be inside startTransition or inside React action. So in this case, we are handling the scenario using startTransition. Again, startTransition, if it is new to you, please watch my video. So I hope this makes sense to you. Let me now quickly show you the error handling part. As we have simulated this send like to server, and here we have only taken care of the positive case. Let us now again simulate the error case. How we can do that? Very interesting. Let's take the help of math.random. So we are saying that if math.random is less than 0.2, means very less likely, then I'm throwing an error, say network failed. So this function gets called from here. So if there is a failure happen, likes won't get updated. But before that, optimistic update will get updated. So UI will show an updated like, but actual state is not synced because from here, when the error happen, it will directly come over here. Now, what are the guidelines that we can keep in place that if such thing happen, what are you going to do? The thing that you should do minimally is bring your state in sanity, set it back again so that you don't have the incremented value. Okay. Though this got incremented over here, but when it comes to catch after an error, again, if you're setting the state value, actual state value with this current value, the moment you do that, what use optimistic is going to do, it is going to sync the current state value to the optimistic likes. So here you are basically forcing the optimistic view to refresh and reflect the real state. Okay. So this is why we are calling this set likes. Optionally, what you can do, you can re-trigger a refetch of the state. Okay, you can do that. You might want to even optionally show a toast or show an explicit error message, is up to the use case. Minimally, what you need to do is a rollback. This is exactly what we are doing as a rollback. As I have taken care of this case, I think it's good to showcase this case also. So what we are going to do now, we are going to go to UI, hitting the like button. After hitting 2, 3, 4, 5 times randomly, whenever the math.random value is less than 0.2, this is going to throw an error, and that error will be logged into the console. That's what we have done. And then the likes value will be resetted to the previous value. Okay, let's see that. First click, all good. Second click, see the error. So network error came, it was 2, and then it's reverted back to 1. This is the scenario that I'm telling. So I'll do again. It become 2. Let's see. Yes, success. So it will be 2. Again clicking 3, success. So it will be 3. I have to do some more time. 4. See, error came, it reverted back to 3. So this is very usual case when you are following the optimistic UI pattern. This is how you should be taking care of error case to reverting back, because most of the time this kind of server failure won't happen most likely for this kind of interaction points, small interaction point. Now if the network is down, some problem happen, think about Facebook or any kind of social media site, optimistic update is very much required, right? The moment you press like, it cannot actually wait for the server call to happen and then actual like to get updated. It immediately updates for you. Okay, like the same way that like how we are doing the optimistic update, and once the server call comes back, it reconciles the way that we have seen. But if it is a failure by any chance, it will get reverted back. You don't see that very often, the failure scenario on Facebook, right? So this is where for a social media kind of platform, for e-commerce kind of platform, optimistic update is very important, but you have to also take care of the error and rollback. I hope it was useful to you. Please look into the code. All the code is on my GitHub. You can come to github.com/tapaScript. Please feel free to follow. And then you can go to repositories. You will find 15 days of React design patterns, and you will find day 08 over here. Once this video is published, you should be able to find this code as well. Okay, so last few things to catch up very quickly about any additional use case and idea. Yeah, we already spoke about the real-time interactions like likes, claps, reactions on the social media or any other e-commerce platforms. Apart from that, you can find this usage on the chat apps like posting a message and showing sending, right? Shopping cart, add and remove things instantly, collaborative editing. You can find it on some of the mail client like Gmail or the applications where you need instant feedback like with votings, polls, etc. Proper use case of using the optimistic update. Also in the world of AI where model might take certain amount of time before it produces response, it might be slow. Optimistic UI update is something that you have to opt for if you're building your use cases and the user experience on the data that is given by AI. So keep this in mind, start using it. To call out some of the pitfall and the anti-patterns, I would say that never assume that it will be always a success call. Whenever you're using this optimistic update, there will be network failure, there will be some failure. So always plan for the rollback, always try to handle the failure path. Okay. And then another thing I would say that don't rely on optimistic UI pattern too much to hide a bad UX. Optimistic UI pattern is not the solution of a bad UX. If you have a bad user experience, bad design, that you have to solve in the design level. Don't force a solution like optimistic UI pattern to solve that problem, right? Last but not the least, about the day 08 task. Very simple actually. Today, if you have understood use optimistic, you'll be able to do it in no time. So build an optimistic comment feature for a mini blog. Okay. So a post view with existing comments pull from /API/post ID comments from the fake server. So if you go to tapaScript GitHub, there is a fake server. One project is there. In the previous videos, I've actually showed it like how to use it. It has a very elaborative README you can follow, and you can actually get running this particular API service which will give you the comments. If you don't want to use it, very fine, you can use any other public API server of your choice. Okay, or you can actually create one using JSON server. Whatever the ways you want to do, you can actually get it. Or you can also have the raw JSON in your code base and you can call that as well. Anything is fine. You can simulate the way I have showed you how to simulate it, the API and the delay. But the main part is here. Create a comment form where user submit a comment. Once user submit a comment, immediately show the content in the list with a sending, okay, level using the use optimistic. So this is the optimistic update, sending. Then send the actual comment to the server asynchronously. On success, replace that optimistic entry with the server sent item, the way that we have done, right? Updating the actual state. On failure, remove the optimistic comment and show actual toast error message. This also I have showed it. So if you have followed the video, if you have understood use optimistic, please let me know. I'll be really happy if this made use optimistic and the optimistic UI pattern simpler for you. I have heard many people saying that it is crazy, this is very, very difficult to understand and all those things, but I tried my best to make things simple for you with a simpler explanation. I would love to know if it worked out for you. Please help in growing this channel. I really need your support in growing this channel. This channel is growing really slow. So if you find my content useful, please share with others. Ask others to look into it. If possible, support and subscribe. You also do. Again, I'll be back with the next video, next pattern, where we'll be talking about another very interesting pattern with a lot of examples and tasks. Stay well, keep learning. Thank you.